So it's now my pleasure to introduce to you Joey Muniz, Aamir Lakhani.
Hey guys, you can be the #1 ghost hunter in the world because there's no such thing as ghosts, so it works out fine. All right. Hey, so this is like the 5th year we've been here, right? So man, I definitely feel old now, and I think that's a little bit of the title of this talk is like, you know, old tech versus new adversaries. You know, I was talking to Joey, and we're just chatting on the phone, and we're talking about like all the new techniques adversaries are using. You know, now I don't know if you guys have seen, there's like deep voice, deep fake, where people are using AI to bypass like facial recognition, voice systems. They're kind of using the best techniques, and technology is always trying to like stay one step ahead, right? They're always trying to like move up one point after another point, and we're like, that's cool, but what about if we go opposite? What about if we go completely old school and try and get the most oldest operating systems we can find and actually put critical services on them, critical information on them? And we're like, yeah, that sounds good, but can we, you know, like, how do we make it real world? So we actually like spoke to some of our customers, we spoke to other places, and we're like, let's actually take some critical services, put them on the internet where you can actually like lose money, like actually have a problem if these things get hacked, and see what the hell happens if we actually like do this. And I'll let Joey kind of fill in the rest of it.
All right, yeah. So that's really the gist of what we're going to talk about now is old tech. Old tech is going to be various types of operating systems. To be clear, it's not going to be things like I don't know, like a PlayStation or some old thing that you can't use. It has to have like some usability to it. Like we actually chose operating systems that have capabilities. Before we go into more details of the talk, who are we? So again, I'm Joey. I work at CISCO. I'm an architect, cover America, South America, and Canada for like security stuff. I got my blog, play soccer, etc. And my esteemed colleague, we used to work together years ago.
All right, so I'm a researcher. I actually do a lot of exploit writing, a lot of zero-day research, do forensics, incident response, kind of all over the place. I blog like with Joey. We do a lot of things together as well. So me and Joey do a lot of independent research together. We do independent books, but we worked on a number of projects. This is just a couple of them. Of course, we've done our own stuff, but like I said, we do a number of projects together, including our Raspberry Pi book, our web app book. We just last year wrote a book on forensics, and that was great. Joey, at FORTINET, I can't really promote a CISCO Press book, so that was a little difficult, but that's okay. So that's us, and Joey.
Yeah. All right, so I'll kick this off. So, yep. So these are the 4 things that we've done together. We're actually looking at doing another one next year as well. All right. So hypothesis, as was said, taking old technology and trying new malware against it. Like again, cat and mouse game. Well, if the changes have happened so much, would the latest ransomware be able to respond to like Windows 3 or something is kind of the idea. Some interesting things with this is people would think, well, how did you test this? How did you use technology to identify the threats? Why don't you use a sandbox? Well, sandboxes have to have templates. So most templates, if you talk to any vendor like FORTINET for the like FortiBox,
FortiSandbox.
It's always Fort or something, yeah. Or at Cisco, it's Threat Grid. But like they're always trying to keep the latest image. So what was funny was we're like, well, I wonder if we could ask the manufacturer, you know, the vendor, if we can have a template for like Windows 3 or for MS-DOS. And that's the way to get punched in the face. Like imagine going to the, you know, hey guys, I know you're really busy developing the latest Windows, but while you're, you know, in your roadmap, do you mind kind of building a Windows 3? And they're like, the fuck are you talking about? So there's no like real sandbox you can really do for this. So think about like testing around the old operating system. So using like snort signatures, basically things around it to actually see if the systems are infected, changes on the operating system, etc. But there's no like traditional sandbox because, you know, we're using really old stuff. Not to mention it was a pain in the ass, and he'll be crying about that in the next 5 minutes about how painful it was building these images. A lot of these images don't have the current technology that we have today, obviously. So trying to VMize these things is a pretty big challenge. I don't know if we're going to give away the images. I think that was kind of the plan eventually, but we may give away these images if you want them. But you're going to find in some cases you don't want the images because they were not worth using. Like immediately going online, they were pretty much raped. But this is basically the hardware that was used, you know, a handful of stuff testing around it. So again, we can't use a sandbox. We're testing around it to try to identify if it's been breached. The images we chose for this research project, again, we could choose Commodore 64 or PlayStation, but there's no usability of this stuff. These are the ones that actually have usability. So basically MS-DOS, like old version of Apple or OS2, and then some older versions of Windows. And the idea is, which of these would actually be usable. For those that have to go early, this is basically the winner. So we'll talk about how awesome actually OS2 really is. And surprisingly, we'll even talk about how some people are actually still using this today with knowing they're using it because they're knowing it's actually somewhat secure. As was mentioned, there's a ton of challenges. I'll let you kind of cry about this, but here's the challenges of actually building this.
All right, so when we first started building this, we're like, oh man, it'd be cool to get an FTP server or working on a NES Classic, right? And that just didn't really turn out to be any useful stuff. So we started off with networking, and MS-DOS it was just like a week before my time. Okay, I'm not that young, but it was like I said, I never realized how freaking awful it is to get MS-DOS working in any usable way. So I had no idea MS-DOS didn't have a TCP stack. So you get that little black screen with the C colon on you, and then you're like, ping, no ping found, no apps found. And so I had to go through all this documentation. I found this thing called Lantastic. I don't know if you've used that. When I told all my buddies about it, they're like, oh yeah, we had to go through that. It was documentation sucked on it. It's no better now than it is. We found other places like DOSBox and some other places where it was already virtualized, but we wanted to make changes to it. So it really didn't help us that there was Computer Archives or archive.com that had some of these things already on there, especially since we wanted to put our own things on there, our own apps on there. When we had it, when we had it running, the first thing is it's like, oh, please enter date, and so of course 07/11 2019. It's like, please enter date. I was like,
please enter date. You guys have a problem with date? Y2K!
I was like, that shit was actually real. I thought they were all lying to us. I didn't matter. You have to do a date before 1999. It did ask for a 4-digit date, but it had to be before 1999. And so we'll get into a little bit of it here. But I will tell you, after we got all this time spending putting it on, actually got it running on a VMware, and I was cussing you out so many times. I was like putting this on. I was like, "F you, Joey," because just when you put the software in, it crashes because the processor's too fast. So you have to manipulate that, and then you read all these articles, you read all these blog sites, and they tell you about 99% of the information, and you get to that last 1%, and the shit doesn't work. None of it worked until you kind of figure it out on your own. But once we actually got it working, and then we actually put some usable software like not SSH servers, FTP servers, a web server, so a telnet server on it. About 6 hours afterwards, people were finding out it was MS-DOS, manipulating with it, and adding malware files to it. So I was like, who's going to figure this out? It's going to be so secure. Everyone's going to be doing an Nmap scan. I have no idea what it is. No, only 6 hours later. It only took them 6 hours to actually infect our device.
Well, it depends on the model, but yeah.
Yeah.
We'll start with it. So again, depends on what we're talking about here. Again, OS2, Windows XP, the different operating systems acted differently. But the first one we'll talk about is MS-DOS. So MS-DOS basically, it has a ton of malware that's still out there, but the malware is very old, and it's still surprisingly heavily out on the internet. Well, like we said, in 6 hours, we started to get these infections from really old malware, even though we would think that, oh, maybe this stuff would not find it. No, it found it. So that's MS-DOS. This is actually it booting up in a VM system. Again, we may give some of these away, but the first one we saw within a few hours, I think it was about the 6 hour mark, was this casino malware. And basically, the interesting thing we found about this is the malware in the past is not like malware now. All it does is screw with you. It's all it has no real big purpose. It's not like ransomware or some tactical thing. The second one, this LED one, we'll show you here. All it does is this. Oops. Let's see if it actually shows the video here. Oh, so we can play the video. Oh, I'll play the video in a second. But basically, it just flies around the screen. And it's actually pretty clever the way they did it. They're actually able to manipulate the visual and turn your screen into this big ass color thing or so. The Virusnator, I wonder if that one actually works. Damn, I may have to run this again here. Yeah, at the very end, I'll show you some of the videos. The Virusnator is starts talking about like Terminator. It's I am the Virusnator. I am a happy virus. I'm now going to go away. Thank you. It's just like annoyingware. That's all really it is. So all this like crazy ass annoyingware kept hitting the computer, which again, it took about 6 hours. We basically ran a few different images, put them online, see what would happen. And yeah, the casino one, the Terminator version of it, all of those pretty much came up and did its thing.
Right. So one of the things I'll add is like, first of all, people are pretty smart enough. They figured out right away this is MS-DOS. In fact, it didn't take them long at all. And there's things about MS-DOS I didn't really realize. So first of all, it has no real such thing as user permissions or file permissions. So first of all, if you're actually in an FTP system, you can do like CD space or whatever, and you're in any directory you want to be. It won't stop you. It'll be like, go ahead, be in any directory you want to be. And of course, people were going into like our C directory and like deleting the start file, auto exec bat, whatever they wanted to do. So that wasn't fun. The other thing that they were that they were doing, or what we found out, is pretty much if you just mash your keyboard with a long password, the software doesn't care. It just crashes. It says, oh yeah, thank you, a great username and password. Love you, get in, do anything you want. So there's really as expected, there's no real security on that. Now, one of the interesting things about this, and this could have been a false positive, we don't know really what was going on. In fact, had a friend that actually thought that since sometimes, and I messed up one time, but sometimes I was mostly using like cloud-based servers or throwaway IPs, and I put my IP address on, and the Shodan actually saw the correct ports open, but it classified it as CentOS. And I started saying, wow, this is not a really great CentOS box. It actually sucks for CentOS, right? But it could be like, it started making us think like, well, how is the classification? If you guys have done any type of OS fingerprinting, especially with Nmap or anything, it's okay. I mean, it works most of the time on most of the new stuff, but I never really tried it against MS-DOS, and we're finding out that the stuff doesn't really work too well. So maybe Shodan was having some issues, or maybe it was just cached from something else. I don't know, but it makes you think on how accurate some of the stuff is
maybe
out there.
Shodan just doesn't know old stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it just can't accurate. So it's like, I guess, one benefit of using old stuff.
Yeah.
You can trick Shodan.
Yeah. So the next operating system I had never really used. Has anyone ever used OS2 before? Like, you haven't used OS2, man. Like, all right. So
Age well.
yeah, so OS2, man, I had never really used it before, but it is actually a pretty badass operating system. Surprisingly, couldn't believe I was saying that. It has some pretty cool things built in. So built-in networking TCP stack right away. It actually had built-in DNS, and it had built-in dynamic DNS, DDNS. At least something that can be shown as modern day DDNS. It had support for a whole bunch of servers. Granted, you have to have the right operating system on there. It had an FTP server. It had a web server. It had a web designer that you could actually like interact with, like some e-commerce stuff on it. But what really sucked, okay, is when you try and install OS2, you'll find an ISO image out there. It doesn't work. It just that shit does not work. Okay, so what you do is you find like this archive of like 50 different disks, and I don't know if you have ever tried to install like disk-based images. So what you first of all you have to use DD if you find the actual physical disk. Create an IMG file, and then what you have to do in your VM Fusion or whatever is you make sure you have to have an A drive because it doesn't work. So you actually have to create it on a floppy drive, and then while this thing is installing, like you have to like go to the settings and select a new image and. You would think it would go disk 1, disk 2, disk 3. No, that would be too easy, right? No, it goes disk 1, disk 2. Please install and like setup disk. Please install disk 5. Go to disk 1, disk 3. And 15 hours later, it feels like like basically living in hell. You finally get it installed.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. This is kind of the research behind all this is when OS 2 came out, there wasn't Apple didn't have the market share it had today. So malware developers didn't really attack it. So there really wasn't a lot of malware that we found that actually even exists to go after this operating system. Not to mention that the system again is pretty impressively secure. So we were kind of like, wow, this is thanks for coming out. Use OS 2. But the challenge of that is, as we mentioned before, there's no sandbox for OS 2. There's no way to truly test the process level and stuff. So it's possible that some stuff is still happening on there. But to what we can see in the time that we ran it, it was pretty damn secure. And what was funny was that's where Aamir was talking to somebody. We can't name the bank, but there are actually some banks. There are actually some people still intentionally running OS 2 because of that reason. It's like they're kept a little secret of, there's no malware out there because later on Apple got popular and that's when malware developers took notice to it. But at this window of time, there was really no malware for it and it's somewhat secure. secure and it supports a lot of features that they need for like basic IoT devices. Let's use this. So some people, there are manufacturers intentionally using this. And to be clear, this is not like, I talked to a lot of manufacturers that have like old saw mill systems that cut wood, and like they're forced to use old operating systems because there's nobody manufacturing those saws anymore. So they just basically isolate those systems, don't put them online, and just let them run old shit. I'm saying people are actually intentionally using this because it actually has security around being very old and obscure. So security with obscurity type of thing. So again, OS2 was surprisingly, once you can go through the pain in the ass of doing it, it was actually surprisingly secure. But to have fun, we'll go back to Windows, and we can talk about Windows 3.
Yeah. And yes, I know Windows 3 is actually DOS, like sitting on top of it, so all this DOS stuff like works out fine. It basically is DOS, right? I mean, so there's basically a win.exe file and like cwin that like runs this old ass awful operating system as well, and like kind of the exact same problems of installing OS2 with Windows as well. It just seems like there was like just more default services turn on with Windows that are just easier to attack. And then once again, like I said, anyone can do this. That's no fun. So that's why we gave this to actual like customers or willing participants that they had services, they had things like, and don't worry, they didn't break any laws or put anyone's money in danger, but they were putting things like ATM machines as test beds or web servers or some IoT devices or controllers, and they were putting in some critical applications on these that were on the internet, and they're like, let's see how it gets hacked. They're like, this got hacked. This really got hacked. Your theory sucked that no one would attack old school stuff because it's all out there. And not only is it all out there, like what we found is just some of the basic things how people like do reconnaissance on machines, like doing Nmap scans, doing just some deeper scans. These boxes don't even survive that. They pretty much die on any type of denial of service attack, and not only volumetric, but any type of application denial of service attack or anything as well. And then I'll kind of let you.
Yeah, to be clear, like protocol-based denial of service. Like people think volumistic. I'm talking like slow lowering or something like that, where you're just basically doing open handshakes. It will die within one laptop.
Yeah, apparently a ping is like very, very effective to crash like Windows 3.
Yeah. So, again, virus-wise, we had a ton of viruses come out there. But again, interesting enough, the viruses at this time were all like annoyingware. They weren't actually like real viruses. Let's see if these videos aren't playing.
You have to click like select and no.
They don't play? All right, let's do that. No, that's actually, oh yeah, look at that. You're so nice. There you go. Hey, look at that. There's the virus. So that's an example of a Windows 3 virus.
So what you don't hear, what was kind of cool about this virus was it was playing like the like made in the USSR song, like in an old 8-bit synthesizer. It was kind of had some pretty cool music in it. And then it just like goes a little crazy. Now
at the time of Windows 3, Lord of the Rings was coming out, like the movies and stuff. And basically we had this like Gollum virus come out and hit this one as well. So it's like, basically, having quotes from The Hobbit and stuff. But again, all these viruses are just like annoyingware. It's really interesting. Actually, I'll go back. I probably can show the old viruses too. So here's this one. Let's see if this plays now. Yeah, so select that. Why is it?
Yeah, what I thought was interesting is kind of all the stuff in pop culture that we just think about today, like Lord of the Rings or like Terminator and stuff. I guess that was like I just happened to pick a time when with these operating systems when that was popular back then too. So all those viruses are like reference to like Terminator or Lord of the Rings or LSD, which is still popular today.
So there's the LSD one. Like imagine a computer becoming that. So you try to scroll around and everything. It's actually pretty creative that they can do that with the type of technology and turn your computer into that. So that's a mirror like scrolling around. It's just like, damn, this sucks. Here's the Terminator one. See, Terminator message. Don't be afraid. I am a very kind virus. You have to do many works today. Probably not American or based in the U.S. So I will let your computer slow down. Have a nice day. So that's the kind of viruses we're seeing with DOS and Windows.
So what's funny about this is also when we had these things online, I told you it was about like for MS-DOS it was about 6 hours before we had had the first infection. The first infection I think we actually got was the Gollum virus, but it was like the guy that first connected to us, like within minutes, he's like, oh, I have this virus. So someone, just think about it, had that virus ready to go on their hard drive, ready to upload to an FTP server, right? I'm like, wow, like how many like MS-DOS boxes does he actually get run into, right? And he's just like, that's it, right? And then like 10 minutes later, the Skynet virus gets uploaded, and same thing. It wasn't the guy was connected and he waited for a little bit, found something. It was like he connected, like did a scan, and maybe like 10 seconds later, you see this thing being uploaded, right? And then he was even leaving messages. I was like, so like I just really want to know. I'm more interested in knowing like why did you have this like ready to go to upload, right?
Yeah. Well, the other interesting notice, you can talk about this as well, as your ISP. Because your ISP flagged it. So, ISPs have security in some fashion. Well, his ISP at least was able to detect, what was it, like code red or something?
Yeah, so that was... So most of the time when I did this, I was actually doing cloud-based services. I had like VM systems on different hosting providers that I was remoted into. But like every good malware researcher, there's a time where you say, oh, fuck it, I'm not going to launch that VM or whatever. Everything will be fine if I do it on my machine, right? And it's MS-DOS viruses, so it wasn't like I wasn't really too worried about it. This was actually an XP issue. But then my ISP calls me up and they're like, hey, we have this machine that no one really knows about. It's like maybe Bob in the corner who's about to retire next month. But we put in the IPS system, an intrusion prevention system, to detect code red. Like, why the hell do you have code red running on your network? And so I was talking to them. Apparently, it was a really big deal when it came out. It actually slowed down their systems. It like took them down. They actually went through several like acquisitions and mergers. This ISP did, but they detected code red, and it like actually hit their systems, and they were wondering what the hell I was doing. So that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, they actually said it was one box. It's like we have one box left. Yeah, it was decommissioned. Still looking for code red. And now you give us a reason to keep it back up because you triggered code red. We thought we could shut this damn thing down, but
yeah, I tried to have them actually take a picture of that box because they said it was like literally hanging on the wall, like suspended by like the power cable, and no one really knew what it was until they like found the one guy in the basement, I guess.
It's probably a Pix from Cisco here. All right, so last one is Windows XP. Now this one's actually been around for some time, and it's actually surprisingly still used. So without any big shocker, this one got nailed pretty big. But it was interesting, again, like a lot of these older attacks are still out there. Your code red, your Conflicker, as we were talking about, and even ISPs, because of how bad it was years ago, still have sensors on their network. And that's where that call came to your ISP, not mine. And we were just like, really? You guys are still looking for that? So we were doing a lot of research on the side, and like on the FORTINET side, and he found some from his research side, kind of the stats of what's still out there. And surprisingly, like there's a boat ton of still old stuff out there. So the old saying, like once it's up online, it's up there for good, still applies. And that mentality should have you think about, well, old technology versus new threats. Putting stuff online, you're not really worried about the new threats. You're worried about the old threats because the old threats still exist. The same concept applies to like ransomware. We started talking about ransomware in like 2014-15, but ransomware's been around since like 1990. Like some of you may not know that, but like ransomware has been around. It just wasn't a thing until like basically cryptocurrency came out, so you can actually get the ransom and not be like, mail me a check. Let me give you my address, and you can send the police to me. Or the whole idea of exploit kits, which allows you to massively hit a bunch of people. The idea of dark networks, where you can do the asymmetric handshake and have the asymmetric key somewhere that you can't blacklist. These are the things that allowed ransomware to actually become a thing. But prior to that, there's old ransomware. So I bring this point up because if you run an old operating system, you may find some version of a 2004 ransomware that doesn't do the actual like Bitcoin thing, but it's still ransomware, and it'll encrypt your hard drive and threaten you. So the old threats are still out there. And really, in our findings, the big thing was looking at like all the operating systems and find like a sweet window, like this the OS2 one, where people just weren't paying attention to it. Like outside of that, like Windows has always been a target. Like you need to update your Windows. There's no old Windows that's going to be secure. Like maybe some obscure operating system will work, but any old version of Windows will find that old version of ransomware or malware or whatever it is it's going to be. And surprisingly enough, the other interesting part was a lot of the ISPs even still are looking at this, and even a lot of the research companies are still looking at this saying, wow, there's still rampant amounts of malware. like to Amir's point, I'll be interested to know like what servers out there are still hosting this old malware. Like that was the interesting part, and we were trying to find some of that, but it's very difficult to phone back and figure out where the hell the stuff's coming from. Anything to add?
Yeah, no. So that's a good point. It's also like the type of operating system. So even with XP, when we put in XP, like the first thing I did was download it from like MSDN, right? And it's a 64-bit operating system. When you download it from MSDN, nothing works on it, and including the applications we were running. We're like, okay, well that's not realistic. Let us find this 32-bit version of XP, and then once we ran that, we're like, okay, this thing is really, really old and it's infected. Just to go back to like this slide, you got to remember this is active. This is like basically as of like December and January of this year. People are still using zero access. People are still using like NJRAT. In fact, I was actually talking to some researchers, and they're like, yeah, we see hits on NJRAT all the time. I'm like, wow, that's like why would someone use that? Apparently, it still works. And then same thing, like out here is like this stuff has been around for a while. Some of the libraries have been updated, but pretty much they're taking the port from MS-DOS and making it work on your current systems. And most of it still works still on MS-DOS or Windows 3.1 or wherever it is. So, as Joey was saying, as how we detected most of these is we pretty much had these systems, like logically, at least the external interface of these systems with a public IP address, and then usually had them on like some sort of switch or hub where we were copying the traffic. We were doing some sort of PCAP capture, or span port traffic capture, and then we were running like tools like so. A lot of vendor tools. What we found out is they're not really detecting any of the old stuff, but they do have like cloud lookups or some sort of lookup service, and then they'll start detecting that. But then what happens is for a lot of vendors is once they detect something like being hit all the time, then they put it into their active databases. So even at my work, they were like, hey, like what are you doing? Like all of a sudden we have all this old shit like rising to the top, and of course they excluded all my serial numbers, so I wouldn't like mess with the numbers or anything. But we found out with a lot of other vendors were doing that as well. So at first it wasn't detecting anything, then it started detecting little attacks.
For a second. So yeah, you guys, just to be clear, like IPS IDS 101, you realize you can't search for everything. So basically, when you go to a vendor, any vendor out there, doesn't matter who it is, they don't know your network. So like they're giving you this like, watch out for these 40,000 bad things, but those 40,000 things, let's say this lady here works at Walmart, let's say you work at like the military, you work at Sam's Hot Car Lot, all three have different businesses. So how could a vendor in general, if I have an IPS, say here's 40,000 things that match your exact network? You can't do it. It's impossible. So the idea is you're going to have some stuff from Walmart. You're going to have some stuff from Sam's Hot Car Lot that's turned on but has nothing to do with your network. You got to tune these things. This is the whole reason why we do tuning in the industry. Like there's FORTINET, CISCO, Palo Alto, any vendor, unless you do a vulnerability scan and then look at what you're defending and then tune the IPS, it has no idea. I bring this point up because if you use the old stuff like we're talking about, all of the signatures by default are not going to be turned on for the old stuff. And that was kind of our point is we have to kind of magically guess or know what we're going to be seeing because the signatures you get from these default products have no idea about old stuff. And the same concept applies to like your network. Like kind of going on a side thing here, but I always preach about like do vulnerability scans, find your vulnerabilities and then tune the IPS, never set and forget. Like green is safe kind of thing. Because again, half of the signatures usually have nothing to do with your network because you're basically relying on a vendor saying, watch out for these 40,000 things that all my customers, Walmart, Sam's Hot Car Lot, whoever, all of our customers are using. So that was a big challenge for us as well because those 40,000 signatures, none of those are protecting MS-DOS or Windows 3 or anything like that. So essentially we have this default IPS and we're just randomly picking signatures that we think is old shit that may fire, may not. But that's why we're saying we think nothing hit OS2. We basically highlighted a bunch of old OS2 signatures and hope and watch to see if they got triggered, and none of them got triggered, other than behavior analysis. But from a signature perspective, that's the challenge with using old technology with like a current IPS.
Or someone's doing a whole bunch of like ATM jacking and on those OS2 systems and making a lot of money. So and we have no idea about it. What was interesting is we also had like people when FTP was like one of the main services we used when we did this. We had people like leaving nice FTP messages like, you guys are idiots running MS-DOS thinking like no one's going to catch what you're doing. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. The new malware results, right? Pretty much there's a lot of malware written for XP that started coming out written for XP. Any of this old malware written for XP pretty much works right after XP as well. You know, as long as it's like the right, you know, 32-bit, 64-bit malware, whatever it is. The old malware is infecting like old systems when it's connected online, but you know there is that gap, right? Pretty much, if you're XP, you're from a malware standpoint, you're running a modern operating system. It doesn't matter how old it is. From most malware that started on XP will run today, even on Windows 10. Obviously, there's caveats there. What we also found is that Nmap, and this is why we were a little confused about the show dancing, is Nmap did, at least for the most part, fingerprint the OSs correctly. If they didn't fingerprint the OSs correctly, we got like generic OS or generic Windows, like it didn't, or generic DOS sometimes, which I hadn't seen before. And but we had all the ports and everything open as well. Remember, on the old operating systems, no real concept of like users or anything, so like everything's stored in one place. Anyone can access anything they want. Once a user breaks into your system and they essentially jailbreak out of the directories, their root directories, they can pretty much go anywhere. And even if you have any of the weak like security settings on these FTP software, on the Telnet software, they can pretty much do like an overrun on it. They can just like put in a command so long it doesn't understand it and just goes right past it.
All right, so to kind of wrap up this talk here, you know, we actually thought that OS2 is cool. You know, again, we found that some IoT people are still using this. If you wanted to take away any value of the research to say, oh, I can actually do something with this, it's basically maybe you can use this operating system. All the other Windows stuff, pretty much the old saying of upgrade your Windows system, you definitely want to do that. There is no way of securing those. Like, those operating systems are dead. That's why the newer versions came out. All the old malware is going to find it. The old malware is going to hit it. Well, if you want, as we mentioned, we may publish some of these images, but the only one that's really worth doing is probably the OS2 one. All the other MS-DOS images, they're fun to have if you want to like put them up and watch people abuse them. If, you know, so be it. But other than that, there really isn't a lot of value. Like there's all the old stuff. We'll find it. We'll hit it. Maybe like Shodan, as we mentioned, maybe it'll get fingerprinted kind of off or so, but that doesn't stop old malware from knocking it down.
I guess the one thing is, like, when you walk away from DEF CON and when you walk outside, reporters ask you, what did you learn from DEF CON? Tell them OS2 is a shit. And just see what they say, right?
OS2 is a shit, and upgrade your Windows.
And upgrade Windows. So that's, like I said, it was just like a side project that we wanted to do. We wanted to see. We actually had a very different theory when we ended up. We were like having fun. We're like, oh, this is gonna be so awesome. No one's gonna guess what we're doing. Like, all these systems are gonna be safe. And no, it still sucks. I guess anything from Microsoft sucks. No, I didn't say that. I might need a job from them one day or something. But no, just like I said, as Joey said, upgrades to systems is the reason why upgrades are there. Why patches are there, and have fun, I guess. You want to add anything?
That's it.
All right.
Your time. We'll be here if you have questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.